Welcome to Commander Central, episode 124, and today we're going to talk about listener Austin's Trostani Big Tokens deck. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
Max, welcome to another Sunday night deck tech. I guess this is Thursday when it airs, but we're recording on Sunday night.
Yeah, like always.
We got to see some stuff from San Diego Comic-Con this weekend on the new fall set Throne of Eldraine, which is described as a Grim Fairy Tales meets King Arthur. Are you into that?
I am stoked for this.
I am too. It was not what I thought we were going to get this fall. I don't know what I thought we were going to get, but that was not it. But yeah, I'm into it. I like Lorwyn a lot in hindsight. I didn't play during the block, and I understand the problems with it, where, you know, it was pretty linear. You had to play one of the tribal decks. Fairies kind of dominated. But I liked like the vibe of the set, kind of the aesthetic of it, and this seems to kind of have the same thing going on.
Right, for sure. And, you know, all this lead up with all these wolves that have been in the last few sets. I think we're going to see some more this fall.
Man, I really hope we get a big bad wolf legend. That would be very cool.
Right.
It seems to have a lot of like kind of the Innistrad thing where they take the existing kind of fairy tale-ish trope. In this case, it'll be fairy tales and make them into cards, whereas Innistrad, it was kind of horror-themed stuff. So there's that, but it looks like it'll be a little bit more bright and upbeat versus, you know, the scariness of Innistrad. And I like Innistrad a lot, so I like this take on it too. It's kind of Bant meets Lorwyn. So from what we've seen, it looks cool. The Seb McKinnon piece of art we saw is amazing.
Seb doing Seb things, I
Yeah.
guess. Just doing what he does best.
The card that is presumably Goldilocks was pretty fantastic.
With the three bears mounted in the background.
and the bear trap over her shoulder, that was really, really cool.
And that's the new card frame.
That's the new card
type.
frame for whatever that's going to be. Yes, I'm guessing something similar to a
Saga almost.
maybe, yeah, because you could see there was another converted mana cost on in one of those frames, but it looks like kind of a storybook. That was really sweet. And then they announced there's a whole bunch of new things like special versions of cards and different packs that have higher rare percentages in them, and they increased the chance of getting a foil in a pack. So there was a few changes like that. But if you don't want to buy any of those things, you know, packs are still packs. Nothing has changed for you if you don't want to get involved in any of those. I don't remember what they're called. One is a collector's edition pack or something.
A collector's pack, and one was like an extended pack. I can't remember.
But if that's not your jam, you know, nothing has changed then. You can still get the regular packs that have a slightly higher chance at a foil, and that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So they didn't leave anybody, they didn't change anything or knock anything out, but they added some new stuff in. Oh, and we saw that this is the home plane of Will and Rowan Kenrith.
Correct.
So it looks like she may be the Little Red Riding Hood trope. We'll see. I couldn't tell if that was supposed to be her in the art or not, but I thought it was.
Yeah, I think that's the conspiracy.
So, yeah, we didn't see a lot, but we saw enough to really have me interested, considering it's only like, 8 weeks away till we get spoilers for that, and we haven't even started the Commander stuff yet.
Not more new cards.
Yeah. I guess I'll put them in my deck. Well,
Yeah.
I did just finally finish this weekend getting the last of the cards from the core set and Modern Horizons into my decks. I am caught up now.
Yeah, you're way ahead of me. I mean,
you're still picking up cards?
I have not even picked up cards from the core set yet.
Dean Goody over in Commander Time wound up buying a case of Modern Horizons that he cracked, I think, last week, and he had a bunch of singles for sale at a good price. So I picked up the last couple Prismatic Vistas I needed from him, and they showed up in the mail on Saturday. So I put them in decks, and that was the last thing I needed. So I am officially good to go.
Nice.
And now nothing will be released. There'll be no new cards until the Friday of Magic Fest Vegas. So there's nothing new I have to add prior to actually being there and playing in Vegas. So
Exactly.
I may have to make some changes on the fly while I'm there as we crack open some of those new precons, but I'm good to go until then.
Gotcha.
So if you want to reach out and find us online and tell us about any changes you made to decks or what you think of Throne of Eldraine or anything along those lines, how would you find us, Max?
We are online on Twitter by searching at CMDR Central. We're also on Facebook and YouTube by searching CMDR Central. And you can find us on our website, cmdrcentral.com. I think that's all of them.
Yeah, I think so. You can find us on teespring.com if you want to buy some really nice, soft, comfortable t-shirts and sweatshirts to wear.
Oh, yeah, and keep buying those Scumbags Unite ones. I'm still winning.
I actually put my sweatshirt on this morning because it was 60 degrees to walk the dog, and came back in the house and went outside 20 minutes later to do something yep, it is no longer sweatshirt weather. So I took that off. I did not put a Commander Central t-shirt on instead. I should have done that just to be consistent.
You should have, but oh well.
Anything else? We have a few contests, I think, wrapping up here. By the time this airs, we've got about 1 week left, I think, for the Twitter contest and the Patreon contest.
That's true. For Twitter, we're giving away that oversized two-headed dragon from 9th edition, I believe.
Yes.
So look for that tweet and retweet to enter, and you'll be entered to win that contest, and we'll probably be announcing the winner of that
2 weeks or so?
Yeah. Maybe the show that airs on the 8th of August.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then for Patreon, if you support us or continue to support us by the end of this month, you'll be entered in to win the Core 2020 bundle we're giving away.
And we might as well mention this now. We were kind of talking, I think, the week of Magic Fest Vegas, we are, just for the heck of it, going to try to release a show a day all week long that week.
Surprise, Ken!
Yeah. So yeah, that's about a month away, but anyone who's traveling or has a long flight heading to Vegas that week, you'll have no shortage of Commander Central shows in your queue to listen to on your flight down, or up, or sideways, or wherever you're coming from.
Exactly.
So we thought we'd let you guys know that out there. I think that's about it. That's exciting going on. We are definitely going to Vegas. We're going to be in the command zone and going to the party. I think 2 weeks before that is Magic Fest Minneapolis, and we'll definitely be there on Saturday.
Correct. We'll be there for the day on Saturday.
Yep. So that's what we got going on in the next month or so. And I think that's it. We can maybe do a deck tag here, Max.
Let's do it.
All right. So we are looking at listener Austin's Trostani, Selesnya's Voice token deck, and it's a big token deck. It's built more around going tall with tokens, ones that are larger than average, than it is going wide with the 1/1s that you usually see. So we asked Austin a few questions here. What is your meta like? And he said, the meta is just several shops that swing from CEDH to, hey, dinosaurs are cool. So what he runs against is relatively streamlined decks that have removal and a game plan, and most of the time the games end around turn 10.
Then we asked him what the goal of the deck was, and like Dana kind of just said, he wants to try to make big tokens through Helm of the Host or just natural big token makers. With Trostani at the helm, he has the incidental life gain in the deck, so he can maybe try to pull something off like Aetherflux Reservoir to blow up his opponents.
And we ask what the problems are with the deck or what specific things we should focus on. He says his deck struggles with consistency and things to do in the early game, and he needs more draw, and he wants to refocus to his goal of big tokens.
Yep, and then finally, the overall budget for the upgrades, no single card should be over $50, and overall, you would not like to spend more than $200 to tune this deck up.
Easy peasy.
Yes.
So he's running the original Trostani. We mentioned that. The deck's got a 3.59 average CMC. That's a little higher than I would like. And looking at his, it's not. I've seen way worse, but it's on the higher end of what I'm comfortable with in a deck. Looking at the curve, it's heaviest on 4-drops, and he did say his draw is limited, and he is not wrong. He's running Camaraderie, Harmonize, Abzan, Beastmaster, and I guess technically Lead the Stampede, but that's it. That's really his only draw options in the deck.
Right.
So that's something we'll definitely address here as we get going. But first things first, Max, let's talk about the lands, because that's a pretty easy thing to kick around and see what we can change and improve there. The land base is really heavy on basics. There's 12 forests and 12 plains. I'm not sure if that's because he does see back to basics or Blood Moon a lot, but you know what? You can do way worse things in a deck than run too many basics.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to probably change that too much. Beyond that, he's got Ancient Tomb, Command Tower, Dark Depths, which fits his go tall token scheme. Evolving Wilds, a Ghost Quarter to deal with troublesome lands. Grove of the Guardian, which gives him an option to make another big token. Corrosive Verge, Selesnya Guildgate, and Selesnya Sanctuary. Temple Garden, Temple of the False God, and Thespian Stage, presumably to kind of cheat out the Dark Depths token.
Yes.
So land base, what do you think there, Max?
It's pretty solid. My only improvements would be add some of the other green-white duels like Scattered Grove and Canopy Vista and Sun Petal Grove. Those are all extremely cheap dual lands that you could easily take out a couple forests, a couple basic lands for, or even like Evolving Wilds.
Yeah, like particularly in a 2-color deck, I just don't think Evolving Wilds kind of cards are worth it. Maybe in a 5-color deck on a budget where you never know what color you're going to need to go get, makes sense, I guess. But in a 2-color deck, you just aren't going to need fixing that often, or at least fixing that requires you'd have a land come into play tapped. I would almost rather just run a basic, particularly in a 2-color deck.
Yeah.
But Bountiful Promenade is $8. Brushland is under $5. Canopy Vista and Sun Petal Grove are both under $4. I think those are relatively budget-friendly replacements for things like Evolving Wild and the Guild Gates for sure.
Yep, I totally agree. Something if you wanted to spend a little more money would be Wooded Bastion, the filter land.
Closing in on 20, but yeah. I wound up looking those all up today after people made fun of me for not realizing that Cabal Coffers was no longer $35. So I'm like, I probably should make sure before I say Brushland's, $5 and make sure it doesn't spike to 15 and I didn't notice it.
I'm surprised it's that low, to be honest.
I actually was a little bit too. I thought that was going to be the one that was higher. Actually, I'm kind of surprised Bountiful Promenade isn't now higher than 8. I thought that might be over 10, but that one was relatively inexpensive. So I would replace a couple of those the bad duels or the duels that come into play tap, the Guild Gate, the Evolving Wilds. And Benny Smith would get mad about Temple of the False God in a deck. He said he dislikes that card, says no one should run it. I don't dislike it quite as much, but I don't like it either. I've kind of stopped running it in most of my decks.
Really?
Yeah, it's burned me too many times. It's also it's something that it's fine sometimes too, but like there's been enough times when, you look at your hand and you're like, if this was any card but a Temple of the False God, I could keep it, but I can't because it's Temple.
That's fair. I just might not have that type of luck.
Yeah,
it always works out for me.
The one card I would recommend adding here for sure, I think, is Vesuva. I think if you are intent on doing kind of cheaty stuff to get that Dark Depths token out, which seems to be the case with Thespian Stage, Vesuva is just one more option and one more way to do that. So that would be one I would recommend that's outside of the ones we already said. And we always say Scavenger Grounds, but Scavenger Grounds. There's definitely almost no downside to it in a 2-color deck. And it can save you. I mean, it saved me. I don't even know how many times it saved my butt from someone doing something. And there's not a ton of recursion in this deck, so there's just not much downside to it.
Yep.
So the main ones I would probably look at pulling is Evolving Wilds, Selesnya Guildgate, Selesnya Sanctuary, Temple of the False God, maybe Corrosive Verge, and I would look at adding something like Vesuva, the couple duels we mentioned, and Scavenger Grounds. Anything else from you there?
No, I think that is completely it in my book.
Yeah, and you could like go deeper and run a few more duels and pull some basics if you wanted to, or throw another couple utility lands in there. Core Haven's always good. I would, I'm comfortable running like at that many basics. You do have some room to play. You could easily pull a basic and put in like a Core Haven to protect yourself, or put in something along those lines. There's room to do that, but also, you can play it safe and run that many basics and probably be fine most of the time too.
Yeah, I mean, I play a green-white deck and I run 12 basics total, so...
Right. And, occasionally, yes, you do get burned by a Blood Moon or something, but it's one of those things you kind of have to, in your head, like say, okay, I lost that game to that Blood Moon because I didn't have enough basics in my deck, but how many other games did I have a chance to win because I had perfect mana all the time?
Exactly.
And
if you don't see them in your meta, Who
Or you
cares?
see, or you see one. Okay, so you see one in that one red deck, and the person who has that deck plays it every fifth game, and in those every fifth games, he finds the Blood Moon 1 out of 5 of those games. So you see it and it burns you that one time. That's not fun, but also how many other games does having that good mana base do something else that offsets it? So it's very meta dependent to a degree, but there's absolutely situations where it's worth being greedy. And there's ones where it's worth being safe. So how about the sorceries? You want to go over those for us here?
Yeah, so there are 12 sorceries. We have Call of the Conclave, which makes a 3/3 token. We have Camaraderie, which is a draw spell and a gain life spell. We have Grow from the Ashes, which is a ramp spell which you can kick to get an extra land. Harmonize, draw spell. Hour of Reckoning is a board wipe for non-token creatures. Kodama's Reach. Lead the Stampede. It's a nice little tutor, I guess. Martial Coup. Mimic Slime, or Miming Slime. Nissa's Pilgrimage, Pier's Whim, and Sylvan Scrying.
Now, there's a few changes here. There's a few cards here I question. How about you?
Yes, I would. And it all kind of starts with the goal of the deck being tall tokens.
Okay, so we've mentioned the lands, which have nothing to do really with the deck other than they make it function more smoothly no matter how you build the deck.
Right.
So now we'll look at some things that actually have to do with how the deck is built and how it runs. And you had some different ideas here. You thought it should be more go wide than go tall.
Yeah. The thing I like it with going wide in green-white is just easy. You can recuperate
For sure.
fast. Your commander has built-in lifelink, so instead of spending 2 mana for Call the Conclave to make a 3/3 and gain 3 life, you could be making 4 1/1s, or you could be making more tokens for the same amount of mana, or maybe a little more, and gaining more life faster. Especially if Aetherflux Reservoir is a win condition in this deck.
Yes. I would agree that generally speaking, particularly in Selesnya, going wide with tokens is better.
Mm-hmm.
However, any of the changes I suggested were to maintain the going tall theme, because I of all people completely understand building a suboptimal deck to do a weird thing that you want it to do. So you're not wrong at all. I completely agree. If you were trying just to build for power, small tokens going wide is better. I did try to keep basically the theme here intact in terms of going tall. So I think we'll have a few different suggestions as we move forward, but that's good. That gives them different choices he can make. Different options, absolutely. So the first card that kind of jumped out at me here, and it actually isn't even really, it doesn't have much to do with either of those strategies, is Grow from the Ashes.
Yep.
Grow from the Ashes is from Dominaria. It's a 3 mana, 2 and a green sorcery that has Kicker 2, and you can search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. If the spell was kicked, it said search for 2 basic lands, put them onto the battlefield, and shuffle your library. It's not a bad card, but like I feel like you want to go either cheaper with Nature's Lore, that's just always going to get you basically any land. To Nature's Lore will grab you a dual if it has a basic land type, and put it into play untapped. So it'll do it if you don't kick Grow from the Ashes. Nature's Lore will get you 1 better land untapped, and if you do kick Grow from the Ashes, Skyshroud Claim is going to get you 2 lands of any type, as long as it's got a basic land type on it, untapped for 1 less mana. I guess the flexibility is there. You're paying 1 mana more than either of those 2 spells to have the option to do it at any point in the game. But I don't think that flexibility is worth it, particularly because it has to be a basic land card, whereas either of those 2 can go grab you your... if you happen to put a Savannah in the deck, but you have a Temple Garden, or you have the land from, either the Battle for Zendikar land or the Cycling Duel from Amonkhet, the name for both, I don't remember. Canopy Vista's 1 and...
Scattered Groves.
So you can go get any of those 4 lands with it as well. So I would go one of those 2 directions. I would go down to Nature's Lore, which is, always 2 mana, or go up to Skyshroud Claim to get 2 lands at 4. I don't think the flexibility is worth it on Grow from the Ashes.
I 100% agree with you, and I actually would say the same thing about Sylvan Scrying. You should just be running Rampant Growth.
The only thing Sylvan Scrying has going for it, I was going to say that as well, is it says search for a land card. So it's a way to go get Dark Depths or one of the... Right now there's one card there that can copy it that's been staged, but if you have Vesuva, it gives you a second way to do it. So that's the one thing about Sylvan Scrying that it has going for it is that interaction.
Yep, but he's also running Pier's Whim, which does the same thing.
Yep.
And my argument for Grow from the Ashes would be put in Hour of Promise for the 5 mana.
Same thing.
Get any 2 lands you want.
Go get both of them.
Yes.
Go get both halves of the combo. That's a good point. For the same cost as a Kick Grow from the Ashes, you can cast that, Hour of Promise, and go get both halves. That's good. That's a good call.
In my opinion, Nature's Lore and Rampant Growth are perfect for this deck. And even Skyshroud Claim, putting that in here for something like Miming Slime, in my opinion, would be great because you're evening out your curve when it comes to ramp, and then you have cards that get you basics, you have cards that get you forests, and you have cards that get you any land. Good
call. Yeah, that makes sense. Hour of Promise. It's a really good card, and in this deck it's even better. That works. Lead the Stampede. So Lead the Stampede is a sorcery for 3 mana. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of creature cards from among them and put the revealed cards into your hand and put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order.
Oh boy.
So here's the problem with Lead the Stampede. And it's not necessarily a problem with the card in all decks, but in this deck, there's 13 creatures, which means roughly 1 in 7 cards are a creature card. You get to dig down 5 deep. So, number one, you've got a mathematical decent chance to just whiff entirely. But even if you don't whiff, your odds are it's 1 creature. You're almost never going to hit 2 with only 13 in the deck. So if you hit 1 creature, that means you've basically spent 3 mana to turn that card into a creature that you have to show everybody. And 4 cards in the deck cost 3 or less anyway. So it's not even like you're spending 3 mana to put a more expensive creature in your hand. Like you're turning a 3 mana card into a 3 mana creature. It's just almost never going to mathematically be a good card to cast in this deck.
No, I totally agree. I would, if there were creatures in this deck that played into the Go Tall token theme, I would maybe argue for it a little more, but
or if there was 30 creatures where you had a good chance of hitting 2 or 3.
Right. But yeah, the low amount of creatures, the low effectiveness of the creatures just doesn't make this card that great. I would argue something like Eladamri's Call might be better if you need a tutor, less mana, and it goes right to your hand, and you get what you want.
So, and that's kind of a thing in this deck that I'll mention that I think we're going to touch on this a lot going forward. I think the deck doesn't really commit to doing a thing. I think you want to make a decision. This is what my deck is going to do, and I'm going to go hard at that and do it right versus like, I'm going to kind of do this thing. So if you're going to play tokens and you want to draw cards, that isn't the card to do it. You want something like Shamanic Revelation or Collected Unconsciousness that draws cards based on the number of creatures you control. I mean, Shamanic Rev is 5 mana. You draw a card for each creature you control, and you gain life if for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. I mean, you don't have to have many tokens in play for Shamanic Revelation to pay off.
No, not at all. I mean, it's 6 mana?
Yeah.
6 mana?
No, it's 5 mana. Collective Unconsciousness is 6.
So 5 mana, if you draw 3 cards, that's great. In green, I'll take it.
Right, exactly. It doesn't need to be a home run to be a good card. But even something like if you're going to stay with big tokens, Rishkar's Expertise is really good.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a couple things here that I would definitely run over Lead the Stampede. I just don't think it gets enough done in this particular deck.
Right.
I do like both board wipes. I like the Hour of Reckoning, and I like the Martial Coup in this deck.
Hour of Reckoning was super interesting. I'd never seen that one before, so...
I have seen it, but in a token deck. Like, that's the only place I've ever seen it. I ran it once upon a time. I had a Naya Super Friends deck that only had planeswalkers that made tokens. like 3 or 4 years ago, and I ran it in that deck for the short period of time I was playing it. And I think I've seen it in like a Gave Guru Spores deck. But yeah, like this is a perfect deck for it.
Yeah.
And really, Marshall Koo, same thing.
Yeah. The other card I think that would be interesting in this deck, either if you stick with the Go Tall tokens or the Go Wide tokens, would be Winds of Abandon. It's the new Overload Path to Exile out of Modern Horizons. Mainly because, yeah, it's sorcery speed, but you can set up your next turn if you're going to be making 3 or 4, 6-drop creatures or 6-power creatures, or you're going to make a dozen 2/2s. You're still clearing the board so those can get through.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good. I mean, that's just a good spell in general, I think, for the most part.
Yeah.
Anything else for sorceries before we move on?
I have one.
Okay.
And this goes towards the go wide strategy, and that's Finale of Glory. It's the new finale from War of the Spark. X and 2 white create X 2/2 white soldier creature tokens with vigilance, and if X is 10 or more, also create X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance. So.
Well, and what's nice for that is it kind of scales both ways. It kind of works as a go wide token maker earlier, and if you have a late game, it goes for that kind of go tall one.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a little bit of mana acceleration in this deck. There's some mana rocks along with a Mirari's Wake. So, getting to that 10 mana is going to be pretty easy at a certain point in the game, especially if you tune your ramp package in the sorcery slots like we just discussed.
Yes. Okay, there's 2 planeswalkers here.
Okay.
Elspeth Knight Errant and Ajani Valiant Protector. I don't know if I love either of them. What do you think, Max?
I don't like either of them either.
I think they both do things that are fine, but I don't think they do those things well enough to maybe justify a slot.
No. So, Ajani Valiant Protector, was this the intro deck one?
It might be, yeah.
6 mana, 4 loyalty. His +2 says put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature. So right there, that's that go tall strategy. You have 1 big token that's just going to get bigger.
Yep.
It feels like you're going to get 2 for 1 or 3 for 1, after using this a few times. His other plus activation is reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Again, there's not many creatures that I think are going to be able to... You're going to find it and say, yep, this is going to change the game the way the deck is right now.
Particularly after just spending 6 mana.
Yes. And then his -11, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is your life total. That creature gains trample until end of turn. Again, I think it's a lot of investment for something to get Swords to Plowshare.
Yeah. And it also, in this case... This is a deck that does have Doubling Season, which we'll touch on later on, but it's not a Planeswalker that comes into play if you happen to have Doubling Season out in auto ults.
Right.
Elspeth does, luckily. Knight Errant Elspeth comes into play at 4, so if you happen to have Doubling Season out, she comes into play at 8, and you can immediately get that emblem. So that's useful. In +1 to make a white soldier creature token. At the 4 mana it costs to cast her, that's not bad. Her other +1, where you give a creature +3/+3 in flying, is useful enough as well. I think she's definitely better than Ajani in this deck. If I had to pull one, I would pull him, but I don't know if she is quite enough here either.
So, before we move out of Planeswalkers, I actually have a couple suggestions.
Okay.
So my first one would be Elspeth Sun's Champion. 6 mana, it makes 3 1/1 soldiers for a +1 activation. It automatically protects itself. Again, they aren't giant tokens, but they're 3 chump blockers.
Yeah, I mean, those 3 tokens are pretty relevant. That's a very big deal with Elspeth.
Yep. Her -4 destroys all creatures with power 4 or greater. So it's a nice Wrath early game. Or it can really do something late game if you need it to. And her emblem makes all your stuff flying and indestructible, I believe.
Yes.
Hey, look at that. Didn't need Scryfall for that one. But my other Planeswalker suggestion, and this is for the go wide strategy, would be Hotly Radiant Champion out of Rivals of Ixalan. It's a 4 mana Planeswalker. Her +1 is put a loyalty counter on Hotly for each creature you control. So she comes in with 3. If you have 6 or 7 tokens out, you are now at 4 plus 7 is 11 loyalty.
Yeah.
So that's hard to hit through if you have a bunch of tokens to block, first off.
Yep.
Her -1 is target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So this is like a like a really tiny Crater Hoof or a tiny Pathbreaker Ibex. It's only hitting one creature. And her -8 is an emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card, or you may draw a card. So if you're pumping out small tokens or big tokens, you're getting a draw off of that.
I definitely like her better than a Johnny, for sure.
Yes, it's a lower cost. I think it's more impactful. You don't need a lot of stuff going on to make her work.
In Elspeth Sun's Champion, I will note, also does auto-ult off a doubling season. Huatli does not.
Right, but...
You don't want to count on that, but it's good to know.
Yes.
I like both of those choices. I think I would, if I was going to keep 2 Planeswalkers in the deck, I'll probably run both of those 2 over the current ones that are in here. I think.
Yeah.
The one thing that Aaron has going for it is it's only 4 mana versus 6 for Sun's Champion, but I think it's probably worth that trade-off.
I mean, I literally just flipped them. The mono white went to 6 and the green white went to 4. So,
that's true.
Overall, the curve isn't going to be impacted.
13 instant spells in the deck. We've Advent of the Worm out of the Return to Ravnica block. Creates a 5/5 green worm creature token for 4 mana. Fits the, with Trample. Fits the Go Tall theme. Crop Rotation, which is one more way to get part of that Dark Depths combo. Crush Contraband for removal. Corrosive Grip for removal. And Enlighten Tutor as a tutor to go get an artifact or an enchantment. I'm guessing that probably goes for Reservoir pretty frequently, or doubling season. Make a Stand. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. This is a good kind of deck for that type of card. It's a good kind of budget to Fairies protection replacement.
Yes.
Raise the Alarm, 2 mana to create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Second Harvest, for each token you control, put a token onto the battlefield that is a copy of that permanent. Selesnya Charm gives you 3 different options. You can give a creature +2/+2 in Trample. You can exile a creature with power 5 or greater, or you can create a 2/2 white knight creature token. Strength in Numbers is 2 mana until the end of turn. Target creature gains Trample and XX, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Sundering Growth is a removal spell. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, then you can populate. Swords to Plowshares is obviously Swords to Plowshares, and White Sun Zenith. 3 white and X, create X 2/2 white cat creature tokens, and then shuffle White Sun Zenith into your library. So what do you have to say about those spells, Max?
I don't like Crop Rotation.
I do,
specifically because it's just getting Dark Depths in this deck.
Right. And maybe that's, I don't know, I think you do, the problem is you need to have a certain depth. If you're running Dark Depths and you're running the Vesuva or Thespian Stage, you don't want to just luck into them. If you've got those in your deck, you want to have ways to go find them. Crop Rotation gives you that. I think it's a good spell. I think if you're going to run it in your deck at that point, maybe you throw in Riftstone Portal just to have one more, to have a good target to blow up to with it. I don't dislike it here. I do think you have to have a couple different ways to go get your half of the combo, even if you do add an Hour of Promise. I wouldn't want to take out both it and Sylvan Scrying.
Okay.
And I think I like Crop Rotation better than Sylvan Scrying given the choice.
Fair enough.
What with the rest here?
I'm also not a fan of White Sun Zenith.
I don't know if you're going to have, 5 mana is a pretty decent investment in that to get 2 white cats. I think it doesn't get good until you're talking like 7 or 8 mana is when it starts feeling like a pretty good cast.
Right.
And I don't like cards that don't get good until you spend that much mana on them.
If we want an equal-ish replacement for that amount of mana, I like March of the Multitudes better. So that's the mythic from Guilds of Ravnica. It's X, green, white, white. It has Convoke, and then you create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink. So yes, I know the tokens are not 2/2 cats.
Sure.
Because if Trostani is out, and let's say we're making 4 tokens, you're going to get 8 life from those 4 tokens. Okay, if I make 4 tokens with March, I'm going to gain 4 life from making the tokens. But then they also have lifelink, so when they block or attack, I'm still going to make that extra 4 life up that I didn't get by making the cat tokens.
Yes.
So over the long game, I like these type of tokens because they have lifelink. They're more they're more of a utility than just a 2/2 cat.
I agree. I don't think Selesnya Charm is good enough.
Not when there's Beast Within and Generous Gift.
Yeah. The target creature gets +2/+2 and trample till end of turn. I don't think that's good enough to care about it, and I don't know if 2 mana for a 2/2 White Knight is good enough, often enough either. So I feel like it's mostly going to be. I just don't think any of the modes are ones I care about that often. And if I don't care about any of the modes, why not just run a really good card that's a card that's always good, like Beast Within or like Generous Gift?
Yeah.
I would replace it with one of those two.
Yep. I'm also not a fan of Raise the Alarm. I think kind of like Call the Conclave, 2 mana to just make a couple blockers isn't that splashy. I would rather run something like Unbreakable Formation, which gives your creatures indestructible until end of turn for 3 mana. But if it also has Addendum, so if you cast it during your main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures, and they gain Vigilance, so it can be used offensively or defensively.
Yeah.
Another kind of pseudo protector would be Rootborn Defenses, so it's 3 mana. You populate, which means make a copy of a creature token that's already in existence, and then creatures you control gain indestructible.
I think having a second way to save your board stuff with Rootborn Defenses, and also if you happen to have something else that you can copy with Populate, I think that is probably, generally speaking, going to do more work than Raise the Alarm here.
Yes. Of course, we could say Teferi's Protection.
Sure, right.
But
always great. Heroic Intervention, always great.
Yep, Heroic Intervention. I get it. It's getting expensive.
Yeah, it is.
So
it's like $10 now, right?
I'm looking actually right now. Yeah, $8 according to Scryfall.
Yeah.
But still, that's
money. That's real money.
That's real money. So these are cheaper replacements that do that type of thing. And then another pseudo like token maker that almost I prefer over Raise the Alarm would be Secure the Waste. So it's X and
great.
white. Create a bunch of 1/1 warriors. Any other instance from you, Dana?
That's really it for me. I think that there is a finite amount of removal here, and I do think Selesnya Charm doesn't do enough. That would be one I would definitely use a removal spell there. But I had Rootborn Defenses as one I thought would be a good card here as well, and you mentioned that, so you've hit most of the ones I had down. 13 creatures, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
You want to tell us what those are?
Yeah, so we have Abzan Beastmaster. It's 2 and a green for a 2/1, and at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if you control the creature with the greatest toughness or tied for the greatest toughness. So that's interesting, just because it's usually power, in my opinion. Ajani's Pridemate, whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Armada Worm, it's 2 green and 2 white for a 5/5 worm with trample. And when it enters the battlefield, create a 5/5 green and white worm, a green worm creature token with trample. Captain Sisay, the original one, is in here. Probably going to go try to find some of these legendary spells like Dragon Throne of Tarkir or the Planeswalkers
or Dark Depths.
Or Dark Depths. There we go. Duplicant, another removal spell on a body. Elish Norn, just a great inclusion in any type of token deck, whether it's the go tall or go wide strategies. Hornet Queen, 7 mana, brings in 4 little 1/1 hornets with Death Touch.
Yeah.
Karametra God of Harvest. Whenever you cast a creature spell, go look for a forest or plains and put it onto the battlefield tapped. It's also a god, so you need 7 devotion to green or white to make it a creature. Kazandu Tusk Caller. It's the level up that can create elephant tokens. Penumbra Worm. It's 7 mana for a 6/6 with trample. And when it is put into a graveyard, put a 6/6 black worm creature token with trample into play. We have Reese the Redeemed. We have Sarah Avatar, the 7 mana. Its power and toughness equal to your life total. And then Trostani Summoner. So when that enters the battlefield, put a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance, a 3/3 green centaur creature token, and a 4/4 green rhino with trample onto the battlefield. So 7 mana to get 3, 5, 9, 10 power on the board. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
What do you think about these, Dana?
So there's only 13. I would want to cut down too low, but there's some here that I don't think get the job done. Sisay, the fact that she can get... If I was cutting a Dark Depths go-getter, it would be Sisay.
Yes.
She has to come into play. She has to sit there for a full turn before you can use her to go get something. I think people aren't going to allow that to happen. Whereas crop rotation, they need to counterspell, or Sylvan Scrying, they need to counterspell to stop those from doing their thing. So if I was going to pull one of them, it would be Captain Sisay. I mean, I'm sure on occasion he uses her to go get Elvish Norn. But that's like, there's not a lot of great... Innate Flux Reservoir, I guess. But same thing, people will see that coming. I just don't know if you're going to be allowed to do that very frequently. So that would be one I don't think is good enough. I don't think Duplicant is good enough anymore. I run it in a token, or excuse me, in an artifact deck where I have plenty of ways to kind of abuse it. And even then, it's only okay. In a deck like this where you can't really abuse it, I would rather just commit to running a removal spell like Path to Exile or the Generous Gift, Beast Within combo we mentioned earlier, and just make sure I can deal with the problem versus Duplicant. I'm like, oh man, I gotta kill this thing, but all I have is a 6-mana sorcery speed removal that can only hit creatures. I would much rather have a 3-mana instant speed removal that can hit anything.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Duplicant. Like you said, there's no way to abuse it. It also only hits creatures, so it's a very, I guess...
It's pretty limited.
It's proactive in the sense that you think they might swing at you with something. I would, like you said, rather run Generous Gift, Beast Within, or even something like Settle the Wreckage, so you're more reactive. If someone swings at you with 3 or 4 things, you can exile all of them. Again, they get some lands, but you're going to outpace them with your tokens, whether they're 3 or 4 6/6s or 80 2/2s.
Right. I think Karametra doesn't get it done. I think Karametra says whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains.
Yep.
There's 13 creatures in the deck, and one of them is Karametra, which means you have 12 other cards that proc that ability. And plus the token deck, meaning you're going to have permanents that have no devotion that are in play. I think it's going to be hard to make her a creature, and it's going to be hard to use her ability. I don't think she's worth 5 mana, considering both of those two things.
100% agree with you.
Penumbra Worm is an interesting card, but there's no way to sacrifice it really in this deck, so you're counting on it dying to a board wipe. And when it dies, you put a 6/6 black worm token with trample into play. If I'm spending 7 mana, I would rather just run something like Giant Ataphage.
Yeah.
That's a 7/7 that has trample, and when it deals combat damage, it makes a token that's a copy of Giant Ataphage. So number one, the token does have pips if you care about devotion for something, but that token then can make more tokens. Ataphage, I don't see it very often, but it has way more upside than I think Penumbra Worm does.
Yes.
And same thing, I don't know if Serra Avatar, I mean, it's going to come into play sometimes as a 40/40, but it doesn't have trample, it doesn't have flying. There's not a lot of ways in this deck to give it that. Again, I would rather run something like if you didn't replace Ataphage there, I'd replace Serra Avatar with it. I definitely think Ataphage is a really good fit here for a deck that wants to go tall, and I will be pulling Serra Avatar or Penumbra Worm for it.
Yeah, my issue with Serra Avatar is, like you kind of said earlier, this deck is really trying hard to find its thing.
Yes.
And it's between making the tokens, playing some creatures, and this little bit of life gain it has with Trostani and some of the creatures, or even some of the suggestions I've made. Serra Avatar is really reliant on your life total, and whether you're still at 40 when you play it, or you're at 20, or you're at 80, Serra Avatar just says, hey, steal me and kill my owner with me.
Yes, for sure.
Or, I mean, yeah, it tends to eat removal just because 2020 is kind of scary, but it doesn't have a lot of evasion. I mean, it doesn't fly, doesn't have trample, doesn't have vigilance, doesn't even have reach. The best you're going to get is it's going to get shuffled into your library.
Yep. I agree. I do think there's a couple cards I would consider for this deck in those slots, though, aside from Ataphage. I think Pathbreaker Ibex, which you mentioned earlier. It doesn't have anything to do with tokens, but it's a repeated way to help punch some of this damage through. whether you're going wide or you're going tall with tokens.
Yep.
I think Tender Shoe Dryad is a really good card.
You're batting 100 on my list right now, Dana.
For those who don't remember, if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing, so it has Ascend. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 Saproling creature token, and Saproling's you control get +2/+2 if you have the city's blessing. So that works. I mean, it's either making 3/3s or 1/1s, but most of the time it's probably making 3/3s, given that it does it on every upkeep. In a multiplayer game, by the time you can cast it, between the lands and Tender Shoe Dryad and one tripper on the board making 1/1s, you just ascend, and then your tokens become 3/3s. I think it's good in either the go wide or the go tall. It's much more efficiently costed than something like Serra Avatar, and it's a genuine threat without needing to give it trample or flying like Serra Avatar is. So I think that would be a good fit here as well.
Yeah.
Those were the main ones without changing things up here too much. I think when you're talking a token deck, I'm used to seeing them with a low creature count because they're making their creatures elsewhere. So I think I would just replace a few of those ones we mentioned with a few of the other ones we mentioned. Are there any more that you'd like to see here?
Yeah, so I have one for the go tall strategy.
Okay.
And that's World Spine Worm.
Yeah, I mean, is it 11 or 12 mana?
It's 11 mana, 8 in triple green for a 15/15 worm with trample.
But I mean, you got to deal with that.
You got to deal with it, and when it dies, you make 3 5/5 worm tokens with trample, and it gets shuffled into your library. So
you can see it again.
You can see it again. So we'll get to this in the artifacts, but your Helm of the Host making copies of this.
Yeah.
The token dies.
Blade of Selves, I believe.
Blade of Selves. Well, that too. Helm of the Host is in here too.
Yeah, I mean, I like that as well. That's a good one. Or even something like not World Spine Worm, excuse me. The artifact, the name just blanked on me. Wormcoil Engine. I knew. Yeah, see, thanks, Max.
You're welcome. I had that, but that's a kind of expensive card too.
It is. That's a pricey one, definitely. Although World Spine Worm isn't cheap anymore. When that was like a $2 card. I guess it's
$7.
Yeah, it's not nearly as bad as Wormcoil Engine. Yeah. So yeah, I think some of those like cards that are just always a problem and always have to get dealt with. If someone drops a Wormcoil Engine or a Giant Adaphage or a World Spine Worm, you have to respond to that. I've seen people drop Serra Avatars before, and I'm like, I can look at their board state and think, I'm just fine. That isn't a problem for me. So that would be a replacement there, and that's a good call. All right, artifacts. All right, Aether Flux Reservoir, which we mentioned, which is a win condition in the deck. We mentioned Blade of Selves and Helm of the Host, which is ways to make copies of things here. And in the case of Blade of Selves, it's making you tokens that are attacking people, which kind of goes with the strategy as well. Darksteel Ingot, which is a ramp, along with Gilded Lotus and Selesnya Locket, Selesnya Signet. There's Dragonthorn of Tarkir, which is an equivalent that you can get with Captain Sisay, and it gives you an overrun. There is Lightning Greaves for some protection, presumably for Trostani mostly. Ketra's Monument. White creature spells cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 white warrior token with Vigilance. Phyrexian Processor. You pay life when it comes into play, which is easy with Trostani, and you can spend 4 and tap it to make an X black minion creature token, where X is the life paid. The 2 lockets we mentioned, Trading Post does 15 different things, and Well of Lost Dreams. Whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained if you do draw X cards. There's a couple here. I think Ketra's Monument has the same exact problem as we mentioned before with a couple other cards where you're only running 13 creatures.
Yeah.
So you're spending 3 mana on a spell that reduces the mana cost, and they're not all white creatures. It's only white creatures where it reduces the cost too.
There are not many of those in this deck.
No, I mean, Abzan Beastmaster is not white. The Duplicant is not white. Hornet Queen is not white. Kazu Tuskcaller is not white. Penumbra Worm isn't. So the way the deck stands right now, it's only reducing the cost on 7 cards in the entire deck.
Yep.
and it only procs the creature token on 13 of them because there's only 13 creatures. I guess 14 counting the commander.
Right.
That's not enough stuff.
No, I 100% agree with you.
So that would be an easy one. I would swap out for any of the other cards we mentioned before because it just isn't getting enough done, or just turn it into a different mana rock.
Like the Talisman.
Right, yeah. Yes, that would be one I would definitely consider running here, the Green-White Talisman. Trading Post, you laughed when I said I did 15 different things. I guess I could read it quick. It's 4 mana. You can do 4 different things, not 15. You can spend 1 to discard a card to gain 4 life. You can spend 1 to pay a life and create a 0/1 white goat. You can spend 1 to sacrifice a creature and return target artifact card from the graveyard to your hand. Or you can spend 1 to sacrifice an artifact to draw a card. Trading Post is a neat card, and I don't think it does enough stuff. Well, excuse me, maybe I phrased that wrong. It does a bunch of stuff, just none of it well enough or fast enough, I don't think.
Gotcha.
And I've lost a game recently to a Trading Post, like in the last month, because I couldn't. It was like a 3-1 at that point in the game, and I needed to kill one person, and the guy I needed to kill had a Trading Post out, and I couldn't quite poke through enough damage because he kept discarding a card to Trading Post to gain 4 life, and it was enough to keep me from killing him for like 3 or 4 turns, and it gave everyone else a chance to kill me. So I've legitimately lost the Trading Post. I'm not going to say it can't be a good card, but I think the amount of times you just wind up taking 3 or 4 turns to get the entire cycle of things to happen, to get you where you want to be, to draw a card or bring an artifact back is not worth the amount of messing around you have to do.
Right, I agree with that.
So again, I would replace it with one of the other cards we mentioned, or just replace it with a better mana rock.
Yep.
Will of Lost Dreams is not a card I love, but I feel like I have a tough time telling you not to run it in a deck where your commander gains you life.
Okay, you can go with that theory.
So you ran it in Dramoka, who has lifelink.
Yes.
For a while.
Yes.
What were your experiences with it there?
I would rather spend the mana to do something else.
And just draw 3 or 4 cards and be done with it. Then hope you can draw 10 over the course of 3 or 4 turns.
Right.
Or whiff and have it not do anything for 3 or 4 turns.
Yeah, so I mean, Well Lost Dreams, whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life gained if you do draw that many cards. Draw X cards. So in Dramoka, worst case, I'm going to hit with 5. I'm going to pay 4 mana to draw 4 cards. Well, now I don't have anything. I can't cast those cards I just drew.
Right. And you spend 8 mana at that point to draw 4 cards.
Right. I just think there are better things to do with the mana. He's running Dawn of Hope in the deck as well.
Yeah.
I like that a little better in this deck specifically because as it's focused right now making the big tokens, cool. It's a 6-drop worm is going to come in. You're going to gain 6 life. You're going to pay 2 to draw a card versus, I have all this extra mana open. Let's just pay for, 5 life, pay 5 mana, draw 5 cards, and have to discard or can't play any of these cards because I'm tapped out.
It strikes me as the kind of card where it does nothing for like 3 or 4 games in a row when you have it out, and you're just getting ready to pull it out because you're mad at it. And then you have that one game where you've just ramped a bunch, have a bunch of free mana lying around, and you gain some life and draw 9 cards off, and you're like, oh man, that card's a beast. I'm going to keep it in. And then it does nothing for 5 or 6 more games till the point where you're ready to pull it out, and then it has that one game where it does work. Because I've played those cards before where like you just are ready to pull them and they save themselves. Yeah. And this strikes me as that kind of card where it's like good enough just once in a while just to keep you from committing to pulling it out of your deck. But I think you should pull it. I don't think it's good enough.
No, there's an enchantment I think I would rather run, and we'll cover that later.
Okay. I like Phyrexian Processor here a lot, particularly with the life gain that you get from Trostani. That's a nice fit.
I do and I don't.
What don't you like about it?
So you pay the 4 mana, it enters the battlefield, and you pay 5 life.
Yeah.
Or let's say it's early in the game. You pay 10 life. It knocks you down to 30. Well, you probably just spent your turn playing this card.
Yeah, early game, definitely. You're not going to have 8 mana free.
Right. if you don't have a consistent way to do this and use it right away, you will run the huge risk of having it blown up before you can even get to use it to get that life back, if Trostani is even out on the battlefield.
I do like it, but I agree it scales weirdly because the more life you pay, the better it is, the more incentive people have to destroy it. And the less life you pay, then the 4 mana you spend to make the token becomes not worthwhile. Mm-hmm. So it encourages you to take a high risk.
Right.
There's no safe way to play it really necessarily. I still think you probably have some room to breathe because of the life gain on Trostani. But I see the point you're making. I think I would keep it in the deck. I think there's enough maybe upside here, and I think it's probably a fun card where you're like I've played those cards before. I always think Dark Prophecy killed me a bunch of times in my Tesa deck.
Yep.
But my attitude is always like, well, that's just what happens sometimes. Maybe this is that card where you're like, once in a while it's going to kill me because I'm going to overextend, and once in a while I'm going to make a bunch of 20/20 tokens, and that's fun too.
Right. I guess what really had me drawn to this was he said in his meta, they are very streamlined decks that have removal.
Yes, and this is asking to get removed for sure.
If I were to consider putting this into a token deck in our meta, it would get the cut at that 105 mark because I'm going to play this, I'm going to go big, throw 15 life into it, and it's going to get blown up at my end step.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. How about Dragon Throne of Tarkir?
For the current strategy of everything being big tokens, big bodies, I like it. It's that pseudo Pathbreaker, Crater Hoof type thing.
But I mean, for the mana you're spending, it's going to be 4 to cast, 3 to equip, and 2 to use. So that's 9 mana for that for the first Overwhelming Stampede you cast. You could just cast Overwhelming Stampede for 5 mana.
Yeah, or Overrun for 5 mana. For 5 mana.
Or put a Crater Hoof in the deck. Granted, it's not a cheap card. Crater Hoof's 20 something, but
more than that.
Is it? Oh, Jesus. It's Cabal Coffer's expensive. It's not quite Cabal Coffer's expensive.
No, it's Cabal Coffer's expensive.
Is it really?
It's $35.
Oh man, it's what I thought Cabal Coffer's was expensive.
See, everybody, he just got him switched up. He got him switched up for that Marin deck he's building.
Yep. Dragon Throne, I think just do one or the other. Go with just the Overrun or Overwhelming Stampede. It's always going to work for less mana. I ran it in my Recce deck. I no longer do because it drew me a card, being a legend. But I had the same problem there where I'm like, the mana investment to make it work burned me more times than it saved me.
Yeah.
Anything else in artifacts?
If you want to switch to the go wide strategy, Skull Clamp never hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even some cards in this deck that make small enough tokens that Skull Clamp will work with.
Yeah, even where the deck's at right now, there's probably enough 1/1 stuff in here that it's worth running a Skull Clamp.
Yeah. And also Eldrazi Monument, just a way to punch through.
Yeah.
Buffs your tokens.
It's a win condition in a lot of decks. That +1/+0 is not nothing, and the flying is really, really useful.
And indestructible.
It has to be dealt with. So that's a good call there. How about enchantments?
Well, I just noticed the doubling season, so...
Okay. Well, there is 10 of them here.
Yes. So we have Anointed Procession, Doubling Season, and Parallel Lives, your 3 token doublers. Aura Shards, which is just a fun board lock type of card. Burgeoning, Darksteel Mutation, Dawn of Hope, Glare Subdual, Growing Ranks, and Mirari's Wake.
Oh, and a Parallel Lives at the very bottom.
Yep, I said that one.
Oh, you did? Okay. Oh, yeah, with 100 Processions. Yep. It would be so easy to run 15 enchantments in this deck.
I think I want to add 5.
So which ones do you want to add?
Okay, so my first one I'm going to talk about is something that I think would replace Well of Lost Dreams really well, which is Elemental Bond. It's a 3-mana enchantment. It's 2 and a green. Whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. That's token, non-token. There's no mana investment. And even with how this deck is built right now, you're going to draw a card pretty consistently. Yeah. Your commander doesn't draw you a card, but your tokens will. And the go wide strategy, between something like maybe Cathar's Crusade or any type of other token pumps that you might play in your deck draw you cards.
Right. What else did you want to add here?
I also think Divine Visitation would be great in this deck.
Yeah.
Either going wide or going tall. Yeah, it kind of screws up making your 6/6 worm or your copy a giant Adaphage, but that's just learning how to play the deck.
Yep.
If you put that card in, okay, this is not the best decision. Let's see how fast it takes them to take care of that giant Adaphage.
Right.
Then play Divine Visitation.
Yep.
At the same time, I play Divine Visitation, you play Elspeth Knight Errant, and now that soldier becomes a 4/4 angel.
Right.
So it's just situational. But overall, it's just a great card. It makes, 4/4 ain't flying vigilant blocker attackers is not fun to deal with.
It is not.
On that same path with the lifelink stuff, Angelic Accord, whenever you gain 4 more life in a turn, make a 4/4 angel. And then True Conviction, I think, goes well no matter what. The go wide or go tall, just giving, 3 or 4 tokens double strike and lifelink really helps propel this deck to the end game no matter what.
Yes. I had a couple of those as well. I also had Path of Discovery, which was an Ixalan block. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it explores. And that's a creature enters the battlefield that's not cast.
Correct.
So any token you make, you explore, which reveals the top card of your library, and you can put that card into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, put a +1 counter on the creature and put the card back or put it into your graveyard. So particularly if you're making a lot of tokens, it's either going to let you draw a land or it's going to let you make those tokens bigger, which was part of the strategy. But even if you're going wide versus going tall, I think Path of Discovery is a really, really good card in a token deck. And you know what? Cathar's Crusade's always good in token decks too.
Yeah.
I get why people don't run it because it's an annoying card trying to keep track of, 4 things came in, I need to put dice in them. Oh no, 2 more just came in. Okay, so that gets an additional counter in the first 2 and 2 on the, and it's annoying to try to keep track of. But it's also fantastic, particularly in a token deck. So those are ones I would consider running. I also had Divine Visitation here as well on the list. I don't know what it would take out. I do think maybe Growing Ranks isn't good enough. At the beginning of your upkeep, Populate, and it's 4 mana to cast. I think if you have the big tokens out, that's really useful. But I think 4 mana just to copy a 1/1 or something probably isn't good enough.
Yeah, I also think Burgeoning's not good enough in this deck. It's great on turn 1, but late game, he's already said draw is a problem in this deck. Do you really want to be burning lands out of your hand with
Correct.
no way to replenish them?
Burgeoning is the kind of card that you need to be running a ton of draw, and then it gets great. But if you're not running a ton of draw, then it's a little burst on turn 1, and then that's it.
Yeah.
You ramp out 3 lands on turn 1, by the time it comes back around to you, and then you're out of lands in hand, and you've just made yourself look super scary, and everyone's caught up to you by turn 4 because they've just played their lands out normally, but you're out of lands. So unless you draw one, you're at the same place they are, but you've looked like you've done something, and everyone's got their knives out and pointed at you.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's a bad card, I just think it needs to be in a certain deck, and I don't think this is the deck for it. Dawn of Hope. What are your thoughts on Dawn of Hope? I like it, but I can also see how it kind of is a lot of mana to mess around with sometimes.
Okay, so I run Dawn of Hope in one deck. It's in my Dromoka deck.
Yep.
I think of it almost as if it's like a cycling land. It's going to sit there and really do nothing until I gain some life, and cool, I have a grip full of lands or a bunch of stuff I don't want to cast right now because I'm going to overextend. But I can afford to draw a card. I'll pay 2 mana, draw a card, and maybe set up my next turn.
Sure.
It's also great in this deck because you can pay the mana and make a token with lifelink.
Yes.
So, you make the token, and if you save 2 mana to block, it gains the life, you draw a card. I think if this deck was the go wide strategy, it would probably be cut over time just because you're making too many things, and too many things might have lifelink from True Conviction or something where you're just never going to have the 2 mana for everything.
Right.
It's kind of skill intensive, to be honest. It's not just, hey, let's draw a card. It's okay, if I spend 2 mana and I draw a card that I want to play, am I going to have enough mana to do the 3 or 4 things that I'm hoping I draw right now?
Sure. I just noticed too, actually, I missed, there's nothing else I have for enchantments, but one artifact I had as a maybe here was also Parhelion 2, the legendary vehicle that was in War of the Spark, because it makes 2 angels when it attacks. If you're going wide, I think that's kind of a cool card here. You can crew it.
With an angel it makes.
With an angel it makes then next turn, and I think it's a fun card. So that was one I had there that I missed when we were doing artifacts, but I think that's the last thing I had.
Yeah, that's all I have. Parhelion 2 is an interesting include. My only issue, I guess, the way the deck is right now is how much is it of an investment going to be to crew it.
It's going to be tricky to crew it. The first time it will be tricky to crew for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we gave a couple different options here. There's just a few ways you can improve if you want to say the same strategy. There's a few things Max threw out there if you want to go a little bit wider as well. Have you played a Trostani deck, Max?
Yes, I have.
I've seen a couple of them as well. And I think they do sometimes struggle with their identity trying to figure out what they want to do, because Populate's one of those mechanics that does want you to run big tokens.
Yep.
But generally, Selesnya decks want you to run a bunch of small tokens.
Yeah.
So that's always been the problem here. And that's actually, I'm curious, this is a kind of deck that might really get a boost from the upcoming Commander Precon, now that we know the mechanic theme for one of the decks is Populate.
Very true.
And I think the problem when Populate was in Standard was, most of the tokens in Standard tend to be 1/1s. There was a few things that weren't in Selesnya, but it wound up being kind of a weak mechanic, I felt like, because they couldn't put the tools out there that it needs and wants in Standard. Whereas in Commander, I'm really, really curious. If we see a deck that's devoted to making big tokens that you can then populate to good effect, there could be some good cards in that deck for this one. So we'll have to see where it's at here in 3 or 4 weeks. Well, Austin, thank you very much for sending us this deck to take a look at, and thank you very much for supporting us on Patreon.
Yeah, and of course, any of our listeners that would like to get a Decks You Play episode, head over to our Patreon page and check that out. And if you're willing to support us financially, we always appreciate that.
We do. We will be back with Chris next week for our normal show. On Monday, our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. Our show is edited by Ken Peddle. You can find him on Twitter at LOAD3R. You can find me at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Central_Max. And you can find Chris at YSquishy1. Until next show, I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.